welcome. Welcome to our joint effort today. I'm thrilled to be here with two of my favorite people in the entire world, Tan Nguyen, who I'm actually a co-hosting this podcast and video blog with. And we both are so excited to talk to our guest today, Dr. Katie Toppel. Dr. Toppel is an English language development specialist from Portland, Oregon. She's also the co founder of ELL Chat Book Club, along with Tan Nguyen. And so, Katie, well, we're super excited to talk to you today. I'm going to ask Tan to tell us a little bit about his podcast. I'm sure we'll both probably record an independent introduction to this interview, but I did want to give Tan an opportunity to say hello before we start asking you a bunch of questions.
Well, hello to Carol's listeners, because uh, this is the fruit of your podcast. I kept listening to yours and Steve Sophronius, and I was like, oh wait, let me add as well to the community. And so the podcast that your people are listening to now is because of you, Carol. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor. I'm just excited. I'm excited for both of us to have an opportunity to share. And thank you, Tan, for inviting me to come on because both of us are so excited to talk to Katie. I'm going to let you, Katie, spoiler alert for anyone listening, if you're one of Tan's listeners or one of my listeners or both, Katie, Dr. Toppel, I keep saying Katie because she's just one of my favorite friends. And Katie and Tan and I are actually collaborating on a project we're super excited about. We are co-authors and we are collaborating on a book that's coming out in the very near future. And so in that, we were talking with Katie recently and we asked her to come on this show. Tan, will you describe what happened last week or why we decided to have Katie on?
Yeah, when we have our book writing conferences together, just three of us, uh, we always start with saying, how are things going? We started with a check-in, and we were asking Katie, how are things going at your school? How's online going, instruction going? And she's saying it's going really well. These are things I'm doing. I'm sharing it online, and people are really liking it. And I was like, wait, we need you to share with us on the podcast, because not everyone is on Twitter. So it's like, because I am definitely not an expert at all in lower elementary school. I have examples from fifth grade on up. And I was like, when I do conferences and webinars, people are always like, please give us examples from the younger grades. And I was like, I know who I can bring on to talk about this. And so, Katie, that's why we invited, and we want to have you on to share, what does it look like for kindergarteners, first graders, elementary school teachers to teach during distance learning. So thank you for sharing with us.
We do feel like you bring a totally different lens, and that's why we're really excited to work with you because I know you've worked with a lot of different grade levels, and so have I. But most recently, I'm working a lot with older learners, and in Tan, I know you have a lot of middle school and upper elementary and secondary experience. So whenever I'm always fascinated too when I see Katie's pre-K, K1 examples. And Katie, your tone, uh, we're in December of 2020, and your tone last week was so inspiring because
Yes.
before we ever even started working, you were just like, "You guys, oh, my kids are so great, and I'm so happy, and my heart is so full right now." You described something that happened in your classroom, and in my mind, I just rewound to the summer and the end of when we first shut down with COVID and how disheartened. I remember, Katie, you told me when you had to go into your school building and you were allowed to come back in with a mask that first time to just gather your things, and you just sat down and cried. I mean, I remember
Make me
that.
cry right now.
I'm sorry, but it hit. I mean, like, I felt that with you. I felt that with you. And I thought, how are we ever, if we have to start school like this, how are we ever going to build relationships the way we need to? Look how connected she is with her babies, with her children. So that's why last week, when you were so full of joy of the connections you'd made virtually with those kids, I was like, okay, wow, wow, look where we are. So could you take us through, could you just explain to people listening what moved you to share that with Ton when he said, "Hey, how are things going right now?" What had happened in your classroom that made you excited?
I honestly don't even remember, but I just have this feeling of I teach small groups of kids and they're just, I hang up with them and I just think how brilliant and amazing and smart and resilient they are. I mean, I'll tell you, I can't remember what we were talking about that time, but this one story comes to mind. I have a student who logged on and she was in a different place. She was in a restaurant. And she was in a restaurant because she had to go to work with her mom, but she still came to class. And she told me, well, I'm at work with my mom. I'm at the restaurant. Mrs. Toppel, are we going to write today? And I said, oh, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to, I don't think we're going to do any writing. She said, because I didn't bring my blue journal, but my mom gave me this notebook. So if we have to do any writing, and she holds up the notebook, if we have to do any writing today, I'm ready. And it's just, I mean, that's just one example of parents being so supportive and kids. I mean, they're doing so much and they're just incredible. And then another time, that same girl, she came on, she was a little bit late and she said, Mrs. Toppel, I apologize for logging in a little bit late. And I mean, they're just amazing. They just amaze me all the time. And I feel so lucky to be. I think what I was sharing last time was that I wrote parents a note because we were coming up on winter break. And I sent parents a message through Remind just saying, you know, have a wonderful break. I am so lucky to be able to spend my days with your children because they are smart and creative, wonderful, bilingual people. And I hope that parents receive that message feeling the pride that I feel for their children because they're just incredible. Oh, I know what it was. My student who came last year from Russia, who was a newcomer in kindergarten and did not speak a lot of English, this year is just super talkative. And when the first graders had to learn how to screen record in order to turn their things in on Canvas, he offered to make a tutorial video for his classmates modeling the process.
That's adorable.
Because one, he can do that technology wise as a first grader, but two, because he felt comfortable and competent to talk his classmates through that. I was like, you blow me away. It's incredible. I'm just, you know, it's not ideal. It's hard. My colleagues are so stressed and they're doing such an incredible job, but it's really hard. And I feel as a specialist, I get to have these small groups, and that's really a gift because I get to really, I don't know, I feel connected to the kids because I don't have that many at once. But teachers are doing an incredible job. And I get the privilege of being in their meetings when they're the ones leading and I'm there supporting, watching, helping, taking notes, doing whatever. But I really try to always email the teacher afterwards and say, here's a list of things that you did that were really great today. And when we have our planning meetings, I try to tell them. I mean, we've had meetings where we all end up crying because I can't say those compliments without getting emotional because they make it look like having a bunch of 6-year-olds on iPads in a Google Meet is normal. They make it seem like this is how we do school. And they've done such an incredible job with teaching expectations and showing kids how to navigate this just crazy year of school. And it's a thing of beauty. And I know that they get down. I get down on myself, hanging up a call feeling like, holy cow, that did not go as I hoped it would go. I mean, I know we all have those days, but when I get to take a step back and watch what's happening in these meetings with other teachers, it's absolutely incredible. And I just, I feel like I'm such a cheerleader for my students, our students, when they're participating in their class of 24 kids and raising their hand and just doing their thing. It just makes me feel so proud. You know, literally sometimes when they answer and they remember what the teacher taught, I'm like, I'm just celebrating for them, because it's not a situation where kids are not learning. It's not a situation where, you know, it is hard, but they are doing school and they're doing well.
Yeah.
So it seems like you're in two. No, that definitely did answer it. It was like very, very inspirational. And the stories of the Russian student, it was like, yes, like you're already giving me an image of what it looks like in a kindergarten classroom. So it seems like there are two environments. Like one, it's kids with their classmates, right?
Yeah.
Like 24 kids and the teacher. Yeah. And it seems like you're also part of that class, right? And then there's another section where you would just have those just English learners there, right? So can you tell us about that? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, when we're in school, I co-teach, and my colleague and I worked very hard to advocate to move from removing kids from class to being integrated into the kindergarten and first grade classrooms. And I am a very passionate advocate for co-teaching. And interestingly, in this remote learning environment, I am loving having the small groups and having our EL students in a separate environment for those lessons. So we're still co-planning and we're still we're collaborating so much and relying on each other so much to share out the workload. And there's still that piece, which is so important to co-teaching. But in terms of the specific language instruction, I am having separate groups with students throughout the day. And I'm loving that.
And the kids have iPads?
Yes, at my school, in my district, we have one-on-one iPads.
And then how do you use the iPads with the kids?
So we're using Google Meets. They're logging into their Google Meet, and I use my iPad with the Osmo, which is a base, and that's essentially what I use to make my iPad function like a dot cam. So I've got a very techie husband who set me up with I've got a second screen, and I use my iPad and my laptop so that I can kind of see the kids big, but I'm really using manipulatives and visuals via my iPad as a dot cam. And I feel a little bit, I don't know, it's not that it's not using technology, but I'm not using digital presentations. I'm using a lot of pictures and manipulatives and things that my hands are on, that I'm moving around and showing kids. And that seems to just be what's working for me in this environment.
I find that inspiring, because something I read the other day was something that we're losing is that the students aren't seeing as much of our hand movements and gestures, because they're just seeing from our, chest up, when you could just back up and stand up and point and gesture exactly as if I were in the front of the classroom. If I'm, it's just that we are trained to be close to our camera and just be these heads, but you don't have to be. So you would have, if you would have been with a small group, you would have held up a block and held up something and talked about, or maybe this frog and this, and talked about these characters from the story. And you're still doing that with the actual things you would have been holding up in front of the kids, instead of being digital about it, is what you're saying.
One of the silver linings, the fun thing, is that the children bring the realia to the lesson. My colleague, who she doesn't listen, but I'm gonna give a shout out to this wonderful lady who is our PE teacher turned first grade teacher because of distance learning. So she was, her position, she was reallocated. So wow. how do you, even people who are doing the same job they've done for years and years and years, feel like this is brand new? So she was our PE teacher, now teaching first grade, and she's killing it. She's doing a beautiful job. But so I'm in her meeting, and I watch her reading instruction, and I'm there for support. You know, you want to put me in a breakout room, put me in a breakout room. I'll chime in, I'll watch. But she shares, she's actually an adult language learner. She's German, and she'll reference things, and everything from a mango to there was an avocado, a nutcracker, what's that special, the frosting with the little sprinkles in it. And these things were mentioned, and this one boy in class, who last year in kindergarten, he was classified as a language learner and he exited, but he holds it up to the screen. So you're like talking about a coffee mug, and there's Oliver. He's showcasing the thing you're talking about. So when she was talking about nutcrackers around the holiday, and a lot of kids don't know what that is, 3 kids went into their apartments and brought a nutcracker up to the screen, and they're making the mouth move. And it's like the teacher didn't even need to have the realia because the kids brought it. It was funny, but also a thing of beauty, of ownership of what we're talking about. And it was,
could never happen in a physical classroom. Could
yes.
never happen that the kid reaches into his backpack. Oh, you're talking about a nutcracker? Well, I have one right here.
Yes. It's a fun surprise of seeing what kids have in their environments, and the connections that they can make in just on the fly while they're learning.
It is beautiful. It can be. Through the painful year that we're having, it sounds like there are these moments of beauty here and there, at least.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I have a friend who teaches in my district, and for 2 years now, we've made a pact with each other that every day we send each other a text at some point during the day of one positive thing that happened in our day, because it's really easy to focus on, well, this happened and I'm not happy with this, or this went badly. And we just, we chose to share the positive. And so we call it our daily plus. And every day we send each other a message. And it's, ironically, there have been times when it's like 8:30 in the morning, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to share this with her, because something already great happened in the morning. And it's really, we have different roles, and it's always really fun at the end of the day, or, at some point in the day, to say, this was really great. Or, even if you think, oh, this day didn't really go well, think about all of the things that happened in the day and pick out one thing that you feel like, that made me smile today. That was special. That was really positive for my student, or it was positive for a colleague, or for me, or something instructionally. And we just love that. And we've done it for, I think, 2 years, but now particularly, it's really, it's a cool way to reflect, and just to remember that every day something good happens.
Okay, awkward pause.
I'm trying not to take over because I have 1,000 things I want to say.
No, go ahead, Kate.
Well, no, Dawn. Well, I just think that's so beautiful, first of all. And I know people listening are going, why am I not doing this with a friend? It just sounds like such a great idea. But Dawn had some examples of some of that realia and some of the things you've been using in your classroom. So I'd love for Dawn to walk you through, since we are doing both video and audio today. So for folks who are just listening to our podcast, we're going to have this video embedded in the show notes of both of our podcasts. And so you can see pictures of everything that Dawn's sharing. So Dawn, why don't you take Katie through some of the things that you found that you wanted to ask her about?
Right,
There's so many neat things happening.
Right. There's so many neat things that Katie has. So part of your responsibility is to teach kids in small group, Katie, and you often share with people on Twitter, and people are saying like, this is so great. Can I have your template? Can you please share your lesson plans? And when I go through your Twitter feed, it's just so many great ideas. And I feel like there's a consistent pattern. And one of the consistent patterns that I've seen is that your lesson plan, that you kindly share your lesson plan out for us. You have like Monday through Friday, you have the graphics that you're going to use for the kinder kids. Then you have activities, you have colo content objectives and language objectives. Just that in itself was like my professional learning for me this morning when I was reading it. And I was like, oh yeah. And then your forms and functions of like, okay, we're going to use specific nouns, we're going to use adjectives, we're going to use adjectives to describe people and things. And so just breaking that down was so clear for teachers. And then you not only did that, but then you provided your actual examples of what you do for kids when you printed it out. So right now I'm looking at a sheet of that has apples, that has icons of 3 apples and a person holding a basket with apples. And then in the square, there's like a tree with 2 apples. And then there are little apples like on the side that you printed out. And then at the bottom,
Those
there's
are actually erasers from
I-
Target.
yeah,
The Target dollar spot always has these really cute erasers. So those are, yeah.
super cute. And you have like a sentence frame where it's like, I see blank apples. And then I can see that they're probably numbers, right? And that's what you're doing for kids. And I was like, oh yes. And then you go to the next slide and you see like, I see apples, and you have pictures of an apple, you have pictures of an apple in a hand, you have someone carving in an apple slice, an apple being eaten. And then you have letters. And then you're putting the first sound is, I'm just like, and then you have this like, when you go throughout your Twitter handle, you always have these like tables. Like this one you have apples are, apples have, apples or I can. And then you have like all these little printouts that you would use in class, in person class, but now you've just used during virtual instruction.
Yes,
So
I'm the queen of the pocket chart. Whenever I co-teach, I always come to class with a pocket chart that I hang up on the teacher's backdrop. And we always have pictures and manipulatives and sentence frames and kind of the pictures that can go into the sentence frame. And I'm trying to keep that instruction consistent. I didn't feel the need to totally reinvent the wheel or how I teach. I'm not using a Google slide deck with students. And so I don't do that virtually either. I've essentially just taken kind of the same things we do and made it smaller scale. It's a lot of printing. That's the one drawback, is that I'm printing a lot of things at home. Because I'm not going into the building to take advantage of the color printer, but I like to have all of those visuals and things. My preference is not to do it digitally, but to be able to really put my hands on the different pictures and move things in and out of the sentence frame, and have the students practicing not exactly what they're doing in the classroom, but I'm following along the themes that the kids are doing with this is a kindergarten example. So they learned about apples with their kindergarten teachers. And then I pulled out different things we could do in terms of learning vocabulary around the different parts of the apple. And they're always working on first sound fluency. And so added in what the classroom teachers tell me kids are struggling with, I find some way to weave it in, but we're still working on language. I'm not just sitting there doing first sound, first sound, first sound. Right. But if we're talking about the parts of the apple and they're going to read the sentence, I see the seeds, what's the first sound in seeds? It just, bring it in, review, and just, I try to work in as much as I can. I'm with my kids for 20 minutes in a live Google Meet. So that time goes pretty fast. It's short.
Can you tell us more about that?
John's mouth is open for those of you listening. Yeah, that was, I chose 20-minute live sessions with smaller groups. So I have 14 kids in kindergarten altogether, and I meet with them in 3 separate groups so that I can have smaller groups and children can take more turns. Because what I realized is I don't like kids on mute. But it's hard not to have children with their microphones muted because of the various noises and whatnot. And so in the beginning, I thought, well, I'm only going to have 4 kids, so we're all going to be unmuted. Well, Mrs. Toppel has some hearing difficulties. I have some hearing loss, and I'm not able to hear children very well. And I imagine that they struggle to hear me and each other. And so even with 3 or 4 kids, having them mute is a piece of it. Or else I can't hear what they say. So I mean, I tell them, Mrs. Toppel can't hear you if everyone's talking, if everyone's unmuted. So, but I've got my visual cards where I indicate visually, okay, everybody needs to have their microphone muted now. Okay, so-and-so, you're going to unmute, it's your turn. And with the small group, they can take a lot of turns, and they're pros at, now we're muted, now you're not. Okay, you're muted, now you're not. They can seamlessly do that even though they're 5. So
show me that one again, Katie. So that's muted. Okay, good. I mean, and then this is unmuted. I'm taking screenshots. So people who are listening, our show notes are going to have this video, but I'll also have some still shots. And it's beautiful. What she's holding up is just like what you see in your Zoom or in your Google Meet, the microphone, and it's red and it's got a line through it. And I mean, those visuals, that consistency, kids pick up on that quickly, even if they're, culturally and linguistically diverse students. Those are visuals that, everybody, that resonate with everyone. So they,
occasionally
even your first graders.
The hang up. It's time to hang up.
Oh,
no, I know. I want to say too, but it's time to hang up. We have to hang up because I have one friend who doesn't want to hang up. So, and my students come in groups back to back. So one is over, and the next kids here they are. So the occasional straggler might need a reminder of the hang up button. But we do have to go.
Oh my goodness.
So I would have never thought about that as a middle school, high school teacher, right? But the fact that you are doing that and printing out those cards, like that is something that's really clear. That's a helpful strategy. That's like a light bulb moment for me.
Right. Even any of us teaching language learners at any grade level, we know how powerful the visuals are. Right. So if we were to start the year with those symbols.
We also, this summer, a group of teachers from my school district worked on a project about diverse literature. And I'm one of the equity pillar leaders for teachers in my district, along with another colleague. And we collaborated with the teachers who are in charge of social emotional learning, because that's huge this year, making sure kids have opportunities to process their emotions and reflect and think. And we basically designed, not from scratch, but we took some other things that are already out there and designed some protocols for communicating and talking about books. But they're protocols that really come in handy across a lot of different subject areas and contexts. But we paired them with hand signals because those work whether you're on the computer or in the classroom. And then we have picture cards for those too. So one of them, my favorite, is the send a heart, which we, have the visual. And this is another moment of joy in the meetings. One example, little boy shared, his dad had gotten into a car accident over the weekend. And he was okay, but obviously that's on his mind. And the inclination is to tell the child, like, okay, we have to move on. We've heard your story. But all of the kids in the class had their hands in this heart shape and everyone sent him a heart. And it was so sweet because it wasn't just the teacher saying, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. And I can't remember, I think it was initiated by one of the children in the class. But when you see this screen full of 6-year-olds and they're all forming a heart with their hands because they learned that is the gesture for I'm sending you love, or I'm sending you a heart. Right. And our intention was, if you read a book and one of the characters experiences something that you haven't been through, but you want to be an ally to that character, or you want to be an ally to someone in your class who's gone through something that you haven't experienced, you can send them a heart. And that's a way to show them that you care about them, you're thinking of them. And that gesture has become, integrated when kids use it more so in connection with each other, not as much in connection to the literature. But it's so, and one student who actually, another cool story, I have a student who connects to my class from Libya, because her family chose online distance learning for the entire year. And so she's in
Wow.
Libya with her mom and her sister. And she connects to me every morning at 8 o'clock. We specially chose that time of day so she can join. And she ends her call every day by
Oh,
showing that
By
signal.
showing her heart, her hands in the shape of a heart, because
Yeah.
that's y'all's.
But our other gestures are they're
can you
come
show
from
us?
sign language. But when something happens in the book, or that you agree, or somebody says something you agree, and then disagree is kind of crossing your fingers and moving them apart, which is a great way to keep kids engaged. Because if you ask a question and only one child gets granted permission to unmute at a time, all of the other kids are left out. But if you say, okay, Carol, I'm going to ask you to unmute and talk, everyone listen to Carol and show us whether you agree with Carol or you disagree, and they can show those hand gestures, everyone was included. And my friend who teaches 5th grade said the 5th graders on their own started doing emojis in the chat. So there's like a hang loose emoji that kind of resembles the gesture for I agree. So they'll put that in the chat.
Oh,
Because not all the 5th graders want to be on camera, but they can still access that concept of agreeing, disagreeing, being engaged by choosing emojis and putting
It's
them
interactive. It's interactive.
Yeah.
It's like
And
total physical response.
the other is the connection, showing kind of tapping your fingers against each other and showing that you have a connection, so that when one student shares their perspective, other kids can do this. And I was cracking up because the question of the day in one classroom was, what is your favorite holiday song? This happens to be a classroom where all of the children do celebrate Christmas, but the teacher was asking, what's your favorite holiday song? And it was their greeting that they could name the song or sing the beginning line. And one little boy unmutes and he says, my favorite song, well, it doesn't have words to it. It just goes like this. Dun, 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 dun. It's kind of rock and roll. And I was literally thinking that that's my favorite Christmas song, the musical version of Carol of the Bells. And this motion expressed my feelings, because I'm not going to unmute and say that. It wasn't my turn, and I wanted to help the teacher keep the flow. But that was exactly what I was going to say if it was going to be my turn to share. My favorite Christmas song is it doesn't have words, but it's that. And it's just, that's another way that kids can connect with each other and can respond to one another without necessarily unmuting and taking a turn. But it's another beautiful way that the hand gesture, the physical, I have the picture cards that I can hold up to prompt students to show whether they agree or disagree. Little things like that just can create space for everyone to engage rather than one child at a time. Because that's, for our students who are learning the language, that's our biggest fear, is that they're not opting in to talk, or they're not engaged because one child gets a turn to talk at a time, and it's maybe the child who raises their hand. And so even being able to participate with the signals non-verbally, it's a way for engagement to increase.
1,000%. I would agree. Don't you agree, Ton? I've seen this happen in the physical classroom. That's where the first time I saw this, the first time I saw that gesture about agree, and I think they did this for disagree. But it was a master teacher who knew that the entire class didn't need to speak to be engaged.
Yeah.
So you're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You're capitalizing on everyone can be responding and interactive. Fabulous. Ton, what else were you going to show us? I know you've done some harvesting of Katie Toppel out on social media, and you have so many gems to share.
Yeah, it's just so amazing. Like to hear that, just to learn that you have 20 minutes. Like, can you run through it with us? Like, what does 20 minutes look like?
Well, part of the reason of creating this template that you're showing right now is I have a lot of papers, and my desk tends to be overtaken with all of these visuals, and often I I'm wanting something and I'm searching and I can't find it, or what was today's? And so I made the lesson plan include the visuals so that I can quickly orient myself of, okay, what day is it? And what visuals am I going to show the students right now? But I mean, 20 minutes is short, but you can get a lot done. With my first graders, I started, since listening to your podcast when you interviewed the authors of the social emotional learning via distance learning book, which, I have it right here.
This of course book. You did.
And they mentioned using affirmations. And at the same time, I'm taking Zaretta Hammond's Culturally Responsive Education by Design, PLC. It's a year-long course. And one of our assignments was to make a change around your opening routine or your closing routine or your talk structures. And so I took those two things and I tried out starting my first grade group with affirmations. And I tried to make them user friendly for 6-year-old children. And I taught them that we're gonna start by saying an affirmation. And sorry.
Okay.
And I went through and read them. And the first time I did this, it was a total disaster. And I thought to myself, why am I doing this? Like this is not going to work for 6-year-old children. But I part of our assignment was stick with it, even if you feel like it's not working. And they've learned, I use the same affirmations, so they've learned them now, but I always go through and read them for any of the students who are not reading independently. And I have each child choose their favorite and read it out loud. And that's our kind of our ritual for how we start class now. And that's definitely been a plus for me that I've shared with my friend. To hear children say these things is so powerful. And I've learned that you cannot assume that they know you care about them.
Yes.
You cannot assume that they know they can do, you have to be explicit in saying it. And so when children choose that the first one, my teachers care about me, I say it back to them. So if a child says, my teachers care about me, I will state to them, yes, Mrs. So-and-so and I do care about you. Oh. And we've been working on plural. So I point out, it says teachers. It's not just me, it's all of the teachers. And when they say my voice matters, and I explained what that means to them, I say, yes, your voice does matter. And I just try to repeat it back to them so that they really feel that there's truth to what they're saying. And it feels really special. That's how we start our class now. And sometimes they ask me if they can add some. And of course I say yes, and I write them down. And now typically when any child chooses my teachers care about me, they follow that up with, and I care about my teachers. And that was them asking if they could add that. And I care about my classmates. They asked to add that one too. They've asked to add, this is my second set of affirmations. The first set was around Thanksgiving, and there was a lot of talk about being thankful and being grateful. And they asked if they could add, I'm grateful. And I said, of course you can add that. And I'll always ask them, do you want to share with us what you're feeling grateful for? And one little boy always chooses, I'm thankful for my family. Oh. That's what he always says. And it's just interesting to kind of see which kids pick which one they gravitate towards. And on my previous set, I had I am loved. And when you hear a first grade child say, I am loved, it's beautiful. Yes. And then I say back to them, you are loved, emphasizing that you are loved.
And Katie, even with just 20 minutes, you are finding time to do the affirmations, to start with them. And that is just beautiful, and a testament to how important it is, and that there is time. I mean, because if you don't make time for that, I bet the other stuff isn't gonna, it may not resonate as much. You might not get as far with the rest of it.
And it's a perfect reminder that when you do something for the first time, it takes a long time. and it takes too much time and you lose some instruction time. The first couple of days when I introduced affirmations and when we did them, it took more than 10 minutes of my 20 minutes. And I felt like, oh boy, this is going to eat up too much time. But because it was part of the assignment with Zoretta's PLC, yes, the instruction was stick with it. Even if it feels like it's not going well, stick with it to see the outcome. And I very quickly became a believer because it's beautiful. And the kids start really, since I started doing that, I feel they have started connecting more with each other, not just with me. One of the affirmations was, I'm a kind friend. And that little boy who said that was a kind friend to other kids in the class by saying, you know, encouraging things to them during the class. You know, he would say like, you can do it, or something simple. But that, you know, again, that's a moment of beauty right there. When one child says to another child, you can do it. I love it.
I love it. It's just so powerful. So you start with affirmations, mm-hmm, and then what do you do after that?
So in a first grade class, typically I'm piggybacking on what they're doing in with their reading instruction. So without doing a repetition of exactly the same thing, I sometimes pull out the grammar pieces when they're working on nouns or adjectives. That will be my focus in class. And I've learned to really take a bite-sized piece, because when I try to do too many things, it's too much. But I try to make sure that in a given class, they are having opportunities to talk and having opportunities to write.
Yes.
And they'll write live while we're all together. And then the only piece that I ask them to do after is just take a picture, and that's what they'll submit to me, is a picture of their writing. And we use Canvas as our platform. Post break, we now have access to Seesaw, which I'm excited about. But yeah, I'm as much as I try to swirl as much as we can, that they have opportunities to especially speak, because the opportunities to unmute and have turns in a class of 24 or 20 kids, it's just more limited. So I try to make sure that they have opportunities to share their ideas.
Talk to us about SWIRL real quick for folks who might not be familiar with the acronym.
SWIRL is an acronym that I learned from the amazing Dr. Andrea Honigfeld, and it just means that in any given lesson, students speak, write, read, and listen, that they're engaging in all of the language domains. And that's kind of, when we co-teach, that's really the foundation of what we do, that we're connecting to the concept. Kids are reading the sentence frame, they're reading the sight words in the sentence frame repeated with different kind of vocabulary or concepts put in and interchanged in that same sentence frame. We sing a lot with that sentence frame, and then they talk to their partners by using multiple different variations of the sentence frame, and then they write it. And so they're engaging in all of those different pieces in a lesson. And I try as much as I can to mimic that same process.
Even though you're virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous.
So the kids just listen to you and interact with you on their iPads.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're putting emojis in, and I guess they're too young to be typing like words, right?
I typically don't have them use the chat, but they like it and they demonstrate that they can use it. So I'm willing to try anything and see how it goes. When we talked about distinguishing fiction and nonfiction, I had a bunch of books that I pulled out, and we would look at them, and I asked them just to type in the chat an N or an F. And they like doing that, because using the chat feels sophisticated and grown up. And it's another way that then they could all interact with it. And I don't use it often, but that was the time we tried it out and saw how it went, and it went okay. They were able to do that. I don't ask them to type lengthy things, but kind of a short response in the chat could be okay.
But in a typical kinder classroom, you would have students printing on paper.
Yeah.
So you have them at home printing on paper and showing you what they printed on They're paper.
Yeah, typically in kindergarten, we use whiteboards and markers. And I have to give a shout to the fabulous kindergarten team that does drop-offs every other week of supplies and materials, because they're really being mindful about what's developmentally appropriate for students in kindergarten. And they do want our kindergarten children holding pencils and writing on paper and doing crafts and things like that. And so they have a route. We have a wonderful student teacher who created a route, and they drop off materials every other week. So a lot of our collaborative planning is thinking far ahead to figure out what physical materials need to be dropped off so that kids can have real things to do, not just all digital activities. But so all of the kids have a whiteboard and a marker, and I have one too. And we will, the Osmo on the iPad allows me to write and them to see what I'm writing. And then they'll write on their iPads too. And, we hold it up, and it mimics what we would do in a classroom.
I've seen many teachers, and there are a lot of tutorials out there on YouTube about how to just make your iPhone a dot cam.
Yes.
If you're unclear about what Katie's talking about, we'll put in our show notes today her setup, and maybe we can find some other YouTube videos too, because I know a lot of teachers are doing that. And Ton was just showing examples, which is just such a testament to how much Katie shares. This is why Ton and I recommend everybody follow Dr. Toppel, because she is constantly tweeting pictures of what she's doing. So it's easy for Ton to go and find pictures of the whiteboard, the work samples of Katie's students. Ton, what else have you found out there that you want to ask her about? Because these are beautiful things you're showing in the video.
Well, I do want to talk about, there's so many, like your sentence charts that you are so famous for. I want to ask about how are you doing reading with the kids, right? And I also want to ask so what are your teachers doing do they do synchronous as well? Do they asynchronous? I know that yours is just synchronous 20 minutes, and that's wonderful. And then what else are the other structures that are working for Kinder's kids?
Yeah, a lot of the instruction now is synchronous live Google Meets. In the spring, that was not the case. And I definitely feel the connection with kids compared to just pushing out seesaw assignments. I mean, we made videos in the spring, and it was, here's me and I'm teaching, and here's my pocket chart, and I've made this seesaw activity for you to do, and I'm listening to your language. And it was okay, but we didn't have any live instruction. And I so prefer being able to connect with the kids every day and see them and talk to them and just have that live, we're actually together right now. I prefer it. And that's what teachers are doing too at my school. They've got a live morning meeting every day with kids. They've got live reading instruction, live math instruction, and then kind of complemented with activities that they will do on their own and turn in via Canvas to show what they know.
Right. So it's not kindergarten kids sitting all day from 9 to 3 on a camera, on a laptop. That's great.
Yeah. No.
Yes.
And it's mindful of, attention span, mindful of the need to get up and move and wiggle. And, they're experts in teaching the age level of the kids that they're teaching. Right. And they've really done a beautiful job of making it, the best it can be. It's not ideal, but they're doing a really good job.
Right. I mean, I'm so impressed by the work that you're just sharing. I was like, oh my God, how is she doing this? I think it's because when I'm analyzing what you're doing, you have really clear language objectives, content objectives. Then you make your manipulatives match to those content and language objectives, and then you just make it interactive. Right? You're using your camera, you're holding it up, and you're explicitly thinking, how can I get kids to speak, to write, to listen, to interact with each other in that 20 minutes? And so that's really that's the summary of what I'm noticing. And you're just making it so visual for us to understand it. How are you doing reading instruction? Because we talked about writing instruction already.
So the reading instruction is pretty much done by students' classroom teachers. I will more tap onto the comprehension pieces that they're focusing on, and kind of do. The beauty is I feel like I have the freedom to kind of do it in my own way.
Right.
So we do use an articulated program for reading instruction, and there's a scope and sequence, and there's a pacing guide of what's going on each week, and the kind of the topics or themes are designated for teachers. So I will focus on something and then think, okay, well, what's going to make this, fun or interesting when we are talking about story retelling or characters and setting. I'm taking out my Elephant and Piggy books because kids love them. Kids in first grade can read them. I have one lesson where I took the book out, and I was planning to read it as kind of a shared reading, and we were going to talk about, they were working on asking and answering questions about the text. And one of my students started reading the book. It was an Elephant and Piggy. And so I'm like, take it away, friend. And he read it. And that's, I love that. This Mo Willems Elephant and Piggy books are not part of the curriculum, but I know that students love them, and I know that it's giving them practice in sight word recognition, and I know that it's great for teaching characters and teaching about asking questions about the story. And they focused a lot with their SEL on emotions. Those characters are very emotional, and the illustrations show that. And we talk a lot about, well, how did he show that Piggy was really mad? Oh, look, he has that little squiggle above his head. You can see I always call Piggy a he. Sorry, Piggy. She's frowning, and just it's interesting stuff that's going to be engaging for them to talk about. And I try to make it fun and age appropriate and just put my own spin. I'm not the biggest fan of having everything articulated from a curriculum. So I take the essential components of the standards and do, make it something that kids will enjoy. That's what I try to do.
I mean, I'm listening as an adult. I'm like, this is so engaging with the pictures and the printouts, and like, you're just making it visual for us, and we're not just seeing your head, right? And then there's a thing that you shared with us is the language charts, the sentence charts. Like, how do you? I know, like, looking at all of your examples, I'm like, this comes back again and again. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I love sentence patterning charts. I think they're great for helping students formulate complete sentences, but sentences that are rich with vivid verbs and adjectives and things like that. Typically in a classroom, I love to have students make a mini book where this one that Tan's showing right now has ocean creatures, and we talked about specific verbs for each ocean animal. And I would love to have them make a little mini book where they write sentences. And in this environment, we didn't do that, but we focused on the same animals and those verbs all week, but worked on singular and plural. And I made picture cards that had one crab and the word crab, and then another one had two crabs and the word crabs. And I had a song for singular and plural, which I sang. And even though I'm a terrible singer, it helps. It helps when you have that kind of refrain to go back to of what was that particular one? It was to the tune of Jingle Bells. Singular noun, singular noun, singular means one. And then
I love it.
Noun, more than one. And then about the writing piece. If there's more than one, then you write an S. When you write a plural noun, don't forget the S. And just being able to like sing that. And I always do songs, but I upped my game a little bit in distance learning, where I actually made slides and sang the lyrics while I captured the slides showing the visuals and stuff, which I'm a terrible singer, but it's an earworm, that gets in your head. Right. And my children kind of tease me like, Mom, not another song. But my daughter's in first grade, which I love because sometimes I have her try out the things I'm going to teach the kids. Yeah. But she said, Mom, I was writing and I remembered your song and it helped me. And I was like, yes, see, it works. But, we have a little tune for opinion writing, which is what we worked on for the first couple months of school. And every time we write, we we sing the song. Please tell, it's Adam's Family. Please tell us your opinion and don't forget the reasons. Then write an interesting ending, opinion writing. And then we incorporated the rubric into the snapping: capitals, spaces, sound out the words, neatest writing, punctuation. We sing it. And let me tell you that the singing via a Google Meet is like, it sounds awful because just the delay in internet.
Yes.
I don't know what families are hearing on their end, because my husband works around the corner in another room, and he'll come in sometimes and be like, "You are so loud." Like, because part of it is because I have trouble hearing, so I just talk really loud. But yeah, I imagine that some parents are probably like, can you tone it down, Mrs.
No,
Toppel?
I know they love it. I'm speaking as a parent, and they appreciate it. I know they love it.
And then I have, some of the moms are not on screen, but they're right there. And I have one mom who is so helpful because she'll often say, Mrs. Toppel, you're not actually sharing anything right now, because sometimes I'll forget to share my screen of what I want to get. And I'll be talking about it and I'm showing it, I'm showing things, but I don't realize the kids aren't seeing it. So she's wonderful to just tell me, yeah, you're not showing that right now. I'm like, oh, okay, sorry, thank you. But the kids don't always speak up. So it's really helpful to have mom helpers to let me know when I have forgotten to share my screen.
This is so fabulous. It is just so wonderful. I had a quick question. You mentioned you have a first grader at home too.
Mm-hmm.
And so is your daughter, she's remote learning
Yes.
with other teachers as
Yes.
well too. So are you a mom on the side there when she's learning, when she's in her classroom? What is that like for you?
Full disclosure, I feel like I am a good distance learning teacher. I often feel like I give everything that I can and more to my students. And then I feel like I'm not I'm not being teacher mom. I'm not able to help my own kids as much as I would like to, because I want to be that mom that's like watching the teacher on the side and, fully knowing everything that they have to do and being really on top of it. I'm live with my students the majority of the day. I have lunch with my own kids. I check on them. When I'm joining another teacher's meeting, I'll turn my camera off and run upstairs to make sure that they're logging on time, but they're doing a lot on their own.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
They're learning. I have a third grader and a first grader, and my first grader has alarms set on her iPad for all of her different meetings, so she can see, oh, it's time for art. And I made her like a very detailed, colorful schedule, so she can kind of track her day. But they're doing a lot on their own because I'm teaching. And
Wow.
my first grader will sometimes come in when she's in between groups, and like she did before, I don't know if she was visible. She came in. And she'll be in here. Sometimes she'll play behind me, and sometimes she will talk to my students, and sometimes she will like give compliments. Sometimes she takes over my lesson and she starts talking to the kids, and I'm kind of like, I'm teaching right now. But she's very sweet, and she will tell kids, oh, you did a good job reading that, or she'll just talk to them because they're the same age. And
That's
sometimes
so
the kids ask, like, who's that? Oh, that's my daughter. She's in first grade too. And it
is beautiful. That's another one of those beautiful things.
Yeah.
Yeah. We found a video yesterday. My daughter's turning 15, and we found a video of her 4 years ago. She made a video for my students, and she's like, hi, mom, students. I hope this helps you with your English. And she sang one of the songs that they were learning and tracking the print. And we did I just didn't even realize how much asynchronous and stuff we did when I was in the hospital, and when I was only meeting with my kids every couple times every week. And I think that's a really neat dynamic when your own family and all those, everybody's experiencing that now. Our worlds are colliding.
Yeah. And I have office hours from 11:30 to 12, so it backs up to lunch. And at first I shared with my co-teachers, I have office hours, send kids to me, I'm here to help. Nobody came. I told parents at conferences, I'm gonna have office hours, you can, if your kids need help, nobody came. I told the kids, I have office hours, I'm just here if you want to talk or if you want to read. I've had kids every day since I told the
Oh my
kids. They'll come.
Wow.
And not everybody, but I have a consistent boy who comes and we read Elephant and Piggy. We play the characters and take turns reading. And then another boy from a different class came. So these two kids were in kindergarten together, but they're not in the same first grade class, so they haven't seen each other. And they saw each other in the office hours, and they were so excited to see each other. And so they both come to the office hours, and we read and whatever they want to do. If they need help, I'll help them. But these particular kids, they don't. They're excelling. They're doing a great job. And so we just read for fun. And I'll use my iPad and the Osmo to show the book that I have, and they'll read it. And I've had a couple kids ask me, where do you get those books? So we've talked about, the library has a lot of them. Amazon, Amazon has them, but there's a lot of Mo Willems books at the library. You can go get them. And we talked about how the library is different now because you can't just go in and get what you want. But then at noon, it's lunchtime. And I say to them, I have to go because I have to feed my own kids lunch now. And it's time for me to be mom. And they're very understanding that it's time to hang up because I have a finite amount of time to feed my entire family lunch and eat myself. And that's my time to talk to my kids and check in. And so they know, okay, time to go. I've got to hang up. Wow. They're really sweet about that because teachers do have to play both roles. Right. And it's hard. That's a hard balance.
Absolutely.
You always feel like if you're doing well at one, you're falling short on the other. And that I feel that way often. And honestly, it's mostly falling short on the mom end because we're fortunate, and I know my kids, they have everything they need. They're okay. I feel very compelled to make sure that I'm being everything I can be for the students that I teach.
I know that feeling.
Oh, so inspired.
Yeah.
I'm like speechless because I'm like, oh my goodness, everyone should have a Dr. Katie Toppel in their classrooms and their districts.
Wouldn't that be a great world?
I was thinking, Katie, would you be able to record a 20-minute video of you teaching in the?
I think you would have to, because I'd have to get permission from the
exactly. Kids. But I would just love to see what that looks like, to see if that's possible.
We are required to record our instruction, so I have my Google Drive is filled with my teaching, but I think in order to share, it would require permission from parents. Right. But yeah, and it's, interesting that one of the things we talk about in our book is recording yourself, right? And watching yourself teach. And in this environment, obviously sometimes I forget because there's a lot going on, but I have access to watching myself teach every day. And I don't always watch it, but I can. And it's interesting. There are days when I teach with a sticky note next to me and I write down all the kids in the group, and every time they speak, I just make a tally mark. And when I can see that certain kids are getting ahead of the other ones, I make sure to engage the kids who haven't talked as much. And, I do that just as a way to make sure everyone's getting their, as our not student teacher, we had a maternity leave teacher who was filling in for one of my co-teachers, and she phrases it as, it's your time to shine when a child gets to unmute. And I just love that because it is, and it's one at a time. So when they get to unmute, it really is their time to shine. But I want to make sure that everyone gets that opportunity multiple times if they're in a small group. Right. But with the video, you can go back and you can watch. And if you don't have the ability live to kind of see who engaged and how often, you could go back and take notes on that and just make a note of how, when, why everyone was talking, and, think about, okay, what went well? Because there are days when I think that did not go well. That was, I have hung up with students and thought to myself, I was not a good teacher, or that was not a good lesson, or the kids did not swirl. and I just feel like we need to normalize, like, that is okay. You cannot be a rock star every day, and the kids are not going to have a great, I mean, there are days when I've had 4 kids in a group, their cameras are off. I feel like I'm talking to a wall. I feel like nobody was engaged. I did a terrible job. And I just step back and think, okay, what can I do differently tomorrow? It's, right. You have to move on, and you have to be flexible to rethink about what you had planned and change it. Like when the topic was asking questions, the students had to generate questions. I planned everything out. I shared my plans on Twitter. Great. Look, this week looks great. Okay, here we go. Day 1. Oh, I would ask a question and nobody would answer. And then I was showing pictures. What could we ask about this? Crickets. What could we ask? And then I would generate a question myself, and then they answered my question, but I wanted them to ask questions, and then they would answer it. And I was like, no, it was a disaster. It was bad. It was a disaster. They did not practice asking questions, but I just thought, okay, as a teacher, what can I do differently? How can I make this more visual, or how can I make it make sense? And I just, we kept doing it. And by the end of the week, they did it. And I changed my instructional materials. I tried to change I tweeted out, who's got some tips? Who's got some good ideas of how to get kids practicing asking questions? But it took practice, and sometimes I have on my agenda something different every day, and I realize, no, we need to just keep practicing this same skill over and over in different ways until it makes sense. And they eventually got it. Right. And by the end, I was giving a prompt. I bought something from Teachers Pay Teachers with prompts, and it was like, ask somebody about their favorite food. And then one child asked, what's your favorite food? And then another child answered the question. And then that child asked another child. And it was this beautiful connectedness amongst kids asking each other questions. And they loved it. And then I haven't done this, but I thought it would be so great to just write down their answers and then use that as a text to read. Like,
oh, nice.
The LEA, Carol, we love LEA, language experience approach, that if they have given their answers, for children who are struggling to read, they can read what everyone said.
Yeah.
That would be a great text. And just to do that. And I haven't yet put it together really in the way that I visualized it, but that's a great example of asking them to speak. They get that practice of asking someone a question. They get practice answering the question themselves. They get practice listening, and then they can get practice reading that in a text and working through. Some kids answer in 2 words, and then some kids put it into a complete sentence. And then we talk about, oh, wow, did you see how so-and-so kind of restated the question and said this whole complete sentence? And then, oh my God, so-and-so then even stretched it out even more and added on to it. And then it's just kind of just
right.
Like beautifully, because the kids they're just, I don't know, they're just amazing. And they bring so much to it that you can capitalize on what they're bringing to then use that as a teaching point.
It goes back to asset-based teaching, right?
Absolutely. That's what I was thinking.
Well, Katie, it's already been an hour and a half, and I know we can go longer, but I want
to hear more.
I'm chatty.
No, this is because I feel like if I was to teach kindergarten tomorrow, I would die. But I would watch this video again and say, okay, Katie's doing it. She's doing it in a low-tech way. It's possible. And you really showed us how to do that, and your structures and your systems. And I want to ask one last question before we go to traffic light teaching. What do you do with, do you partner with parents or families? How do you do
So this is actually interesting, because I feel as a teacher in general, one of my areas of weakness is parent communication. I do speak Spanish, but I have a lot of anxiety around making phone calls to parents and speaking Spanish on the phone because it's hard. And part of that stems from I do have some difficulty hearing, and it's hard to just catch everything that they said, and I don't understand everything that they said.
Right.
And so I feel like I can hold my own when I have to articulate something myself, but then when they're going to share something back, I'm like frozen. I don't understand it. So last year in the spring, one of the teachers who does my same role just said, you know what, I just text parents. I just text them. There's a lot of great apps like Remind and Talking Points and things like that. This year, district wide, we're using Remind, which I do use, but literally just sending parents a text message has been my most successful mode of communication.
Right.
And I use Google Translate because I don't write well in Spanish. So I will type out what I want to say, translate it to Spanish. There's a little action arrow button that you push. And then I save all their phone numbers in my phone. So for example, it would be like Carol's mom, and then in parentheses, whatever Carol's mom's name is, so that I know the mom's name. But I can, if I want to communicate with Carol's mom, I start typing in Carol, and then that phone number comes up. So they're all saved in my phone. I have so many moms, but then I just can send a message to them. And when they respond back in Spanish, I can translate it back if I don't understand. And I mean, everything from I'm in a colleague's morning meeting and Elizabeth isn't there. And I text Elizabeth's mom, oh, I know, is she going to come to school today? The mom was like, oh my God, I thought it was not a school day, because it was backing up. There was a holiday. And I lost track of the day of the week. Haven't we all? What day is it even?
Right.
Right.
And then kid comes to class. Just because, I was able to say. And I mean, some moms all the time, they're asking me questions because we've built that relationship.
Yep.
We feel comfortable. And yeah, I mean, that has been the best way to communicate. And I started doing a thing where, there's a lot of reasons why kids don't come, because we're doing distance learning in a pandemic.
Yeah.
From home. And I don't ever want to make a parent feel bad or feel shame if their child doesn't come, but I do want them to know that when their kid doesn't come to my class, I miss them. So I started to think, well, is it after they miss 2 classes? Is it after what is the rule of when? I started if they miss, I just send their parent a text and say, I missed so-and-so in class today.
Right.
I hope to see them tomorrow.
Right.
Or I hope to see them the next time we meet. And it kind of prompts parents to just kind of tell you what was going on. We had an eye doctor appointment, or what wasn't feeling good. So sorry, the internet's bad, but it just gives you that picture of what's going on, because lots of things are going on, right? Parents are working from home or working outside the home, and children are relying on older siblings. I mean, let's give a shout to the older siblings, the 3rd and 4th grade siblings.
Yeah.
Yuri, who got on the phone with me because her mom passed it to her, was like, you talk to Mrs. Toppel. Yuri, so I'm going to need you to download this app. It's called Imagine Learning. Can you go to the self-serve and download Imagine Learning? Okay, now I'm going to read you your sister's password. Okay, here's her username. Here's her password, and here's the site code. Okay, do you want me to repeat? Okay, thank you. Okay, can you log her in, Yuri? Thank you. Okay, 4th grader navigated this for her sister because she's right? Like, let's give a shout to all those siblings who do that for their little brothers and sisters who are 5, because they are capable of doing that and talking to the language teacher in English, because girlfriend already exited out of services. She doesn't need to be receiving services anymore, but she can now be a bilingual support for her parent and her little sister. I mean, it's incredible. But just sending that message of I missed him, I missed her, can't wait to see them again. And it's, one mom said, oh, she just loves coming to your class, and I think she told me that she feels seen. And to have a parent tell you that their child feels seen, in your class, is the best thing that a parent can tell you. I mean, that's lovely.
Bravo, Katie. Tell
So
us.
just texting. And some people are, I don't want my parents to have my cell phone. Some people feel that way. And that's a completely legitimate hesitation of, I don't want to give out my cell phone number. But I do, and I feel like it's only been positive that parents feel comfortable to reach out when they have a question.
Right. So your kids go online by themselves. They don't need someone to supervise them to do it.
I mean, I think some of them have help, and I think some of them have learned. I have one kindergartner who comes to my office hours every day to check what time she should come to class. And I write it on a whiteboard and I show her 1:20, you're going to come see me at 1:20. And then she comes on now and she goes, I know what time I have to class. I have to come a 1 and a 2 and a 0. And I'm like, yep, I'll see you at 1:20. And she just wants that reassurance, or just wants to check in. But these children are doing a lot because not all parents are able to be there. Yep. And they're working, or it's
they have more than one child that they're supporting at home too.
Yeah. So it's not ideal, but there's a lot of wonderful, positive things that are happening.
Right. Oh, throughout this podcast, I could have been like heart all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Well, let's end this podcast this way, Katie. Carol, do you want to ask any more questions before?
Oh, I have 1,000, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop because I'd love to hear how you're going to wrap it up with the.
Sorry if I teach you.
Yeah.
So, Katie, what is your red light for teaching kids? Like something you ask teachers to stop doing when they're working with kinders during distance learning. Yellow is something that, how can we slow down our practice when we teach kinders during distance learning? And green is, what can we do as much as possible?
I'm going to start with the green. I feel like as much as possible, we need to give ourselves the grace to process what is going well.
Yes.
And I would encourage anybody who's in a role where they collaborate or co-teach or, work with other teachers, to say the good things that you see, to tell, like, I've been trying to be so mindful of sending that note to say, I love how you had kids own this by doing this, that I loved that. Or, I don't know if you saw, but so-and-so, when you did this, they smiled so big. Just because I get to watch. And when you're in charge of all the technology, there's so many things that can go wrong and it's stressful. But I just feel like really telling people the good and what's going well is really important. I know that any teachers that I work with have said to me, thank you for doing this, or wow, you're wonderful. And those comments mean so much. So like, don't keep it in. Don't tell somebody else. Tell that person what they did that you thought was great, because every single teacher needs to hear right now that they are doing good, and that even if it's one thing that worked, or that made a kid smile, or that made a kid feel seen, like it's really hard to be a teacher right now, and those kind words they mean so much. So I would encourage everyone to say it, say the praise as much as you can. Okay, the yellow.
Yeah.
I think it goes hand in hand with that, but just when you have those days or those moments when you don't feel that, when you're in that space of that lesson was crap. Sorry for saying crap on your podcasts.
It's fine.
When that lesson was not good, when my students had their camera off, when I didn't feel connected, just step back and just, use it as a learning experience, or think about why, or try something different, but just give yourself grace that this is hard. This is not normal, and this is hard. And green light, find the good, but yellow light, just don't be too hard. You can slow down and think about that one thing that went well, and focus on kind of going forward with a positive mindset, because it's hard. The red light is, and I feel like I've heard somebody else say this on your podcast before, but like, stop trying to do it all yourself.
Yes.
Nobody can do this by themselves. We have to rely on each other, and trying to be the superhero, like to be the best teacher and the best parent and the best, and do all of these, have all the balls in the air at the same time. It's not a reality. And so stop trying to do it all, and lean on your colleagues, work together, divvy up the jobs, because nobody can do it all. Nobody. And I'm so glad that in the past, we really forged these collaborative relationships to be co-teachers and not teach in isolation, because we absolutely need to team and to collaborate and to work together, and kind of, we're the pieces of a puzzle. Nobody's going to be able to do it on their own, and we need each other to make it work.
Katie, I think you summed up our final thoughts.
Yes.
I can't think of a better way to end this show than that sentiment, that we're all, I know we've heard it over and over again this year, we're in this together, we're all in it together, and we can't let that be white noise. That is the reality. The three of us, I'm so grateful to know the two of you, to lean on you and to learn from you. And you're a piece of a bigger professional learning network that we have. And so I'm super grateful to both of you, to Katie, who would come and just tell us all and be vulnerable and tell us all the good and things she thinks might not have gone well. But every single day you're out there sharing what is working, so that folks can take that and reflect and realize that is how we're getting through it. We're getting through it together and by sharing. And so I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you coming on and sharing. And I appreciate you, Ton, for letting me share in this interview with you. This has been fabulous. So I just want to thank you both. I know in my show notes and in Ton's show notes, you'll be able to see all the links for how to follow Katie. We just can't recommend it highly enough that you follow her on Twitter, follow ELL Chat Book Club, and all things Dr. Katie Toppel. Katie, can you give us your Twitter handle again, just real quick for folks that are just listening?
It's at Toppel, TOPPEL _ELD, like the acronym for English language development.
Fantastic. Thank you again. Ton, is there anything you wanted to say in closing?
No, I'm just so inspired. And I hope this podcast, this conversation inspires other teachers, and to let them know that they're doing things that are great and they can just keep on going.
Absolutely. I think it's a wonderful tribute to all teachers out there. Yes. We just lift you all up. All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having me on. I love chatting with you. I'm sure we could talk for 5 more hours and never stop, but
that is the truth. That is the truth. Thank you.